A woman in a car, bright desert highway. Her husband on the phone telling her it's over. The plan collapsed. Go to your meeting, we'll try again some other day. And she hauls the wheel across the median. I've thought about those 20 seconds more than any death in this series. Everything that comes afterward. The mediation, the scheme landing, Howard Hamlin dead on a living room floor, runs back through her hands on that wheel. For years I told the same story about Kim Wexler that most people tell. She was the good one, the disciplined lawyer who did pro bono work because it actually mattered to her, who fell in love with a charming disaster of a man, and who got pulled into his gravity until she couldn't find herself anymore. Jimmy corrupted Kim. Kim was the casualty. I liked that story. It let me love her without any complications. Then I rewatched season 6 with a notebook open, and by the 6th episode, I had a full page of things that didn't fit, and by the finale, I had to admit I'd been carrying around a version of her the show quietly stopped supporting somewhere back in season 4. Before I go further, let me get ahead of something, because I've watched this argument curdle in 100 comment sections. I am not about to tell you Jimmy was a decent man until a woman sharpened him. That take is old, it's ugly, and it falls apart the second you look at what he does once she's gone. Jimmy McGill is responsible for Jimmy McGill. I'll spend real time on that later, and I'll mean every word of it. What I'm actually saying is smaller and harder to shake off. The biggest scheme in this series was Kim's idea. When it started coming apart, she's the one who refused to let it die. And by the end, the show puts the confession in her own mouth and makes her say it through tears. I think she might be the finest character study in the entire Breaking Bad universe. Walt reads like an argument the writers are making. Gus reads like an icon. Jimmy reads like a tragedy wearing a joke. Kim reads like somebody I've actually met. That's what unsettles me about her. So here's where we're going. Who really drove the Howard plan? How far back the fuse runs? Why it had to be Howard specifically? What Jimmy genuinely owns? And then Florida, which I read completely wrong for a long time. Most people start this story in season 6. I want to start a season earlier, in the finale, something unforgivable. By then, Jimmy has already survived the desert with Mike. Lalo has already walked into their apartment, and Kim has already walked away from Schweikert and Coakley. They're in a hotel room at the end of the worst stretch of their lives, and Kim floats something enormous. Wreck Howard's credibility. Force the Sandpiper case into an early settlement, and Jimmy finally collects the 7-figure share he's been waiting years for. Jimmy tries to talk her down. He tells her she wouldn't be able to live with it. She asks him, "Wouldn't I?" And then she gives him finger guns. The same gesture he'd used on her at the end of season 4, when she was the one standing there sick about what he'd done. The show hands the weapon across the room, on camera, and cuts to credits. Season 6 opens with Jimmy trying to slow the whole thing down. He asks whether they're really still doing this. She doesn't hesitate. And in that same conversation, she's telling him his car needs more flair. Something American made, something showy. And that Saul Goodman needs an office. A cathedral of justice. She's designing him. But the scene I can't shake is in Axe and Grind. Season 6, Episode 6. Kim is driving to Santa Fe. I want to be precise here, because the fandom has flattened this into she gave up an award. And that's not what's happening. Cliff Main has set her up with the Jackson Mercer Foundation. Large, established, serious money behind pro bono defense work. If she impresses them, she gets to do the thing she's been saying she wants since season 4. Help people who can't afford help. At scale, with somebody real funding it. Then Jimmy calls. He's walked into a liquor store to buy Celebration tequila and runs straight into the actual Judge Casimiro, whose left arm is in a sling. Every photograph they staged with their fake Casimiro is now worthless. Jimmy tells her to pull the plug and live to fight another day. 3 words come back down the line. It happens today, and she puts the car across the median. I've replayed that turn more times than I'd like to admit, hunting for hesitation somewhere in her face. It isn't there. It gets worse in episode 9, Fun and Games. And I want you to hold on to that title, because everything else I'm going to tell you happens inside those same 48 hours. It opens at Howard's memorial. Jimmy gives Cheryl Hamlin the police version of her husband's death, and she doesn't buy a syllable of it. So Kim invents something new on the spot, that she personally walked in on Howard using cocaine at HHM one night, and then tells a grieving widow she should have seen the signs herself. And then there's the one that turns my stomach, and it happens 2 episodes earlier. Mike tells Kim that Lalo Salamanca may still be alive. He tells her instead of Jimmy, because he's decided she's made of stronger stuff. She even asks him why her and not her husband. She keeps it to herself. So I've stopped saying Kim fell under anybody's spell. She had an exit in front of her. She had both hands on the wheel. Every time I make this argument, somebody tells me it feels unearned. That season 6 Kim doesn't match the woman we met in season 1, and the writers only escalated her because Jimmy alone couldn't carry the story that far. I understand it. I believed it for a while. Then I went back and traced the fuse, and it burns a lot longer than I remembered. Season 2, Switch. Jimmy picks the mark, a loud stockbroker at a hotel bar. Kim is hesitant, and once she's in, she does far more than follow his lead. She invents Giselle St. Clair on the spot. The name, a South African backstory, a whole other woman. She's the one who steers him toward the $50 a shot tequila. Watch her face when it lands. Season 4, Kushada. Here I owe you a correction, because I got this wrong the first time I made this argument out loud. I had it in my head that Jimmy dreamed up the fake letter writing campaign to save Huel, and Kim reluctantly went along with it. She designed it. She bought the stationery. She ran the legal end while he rode the bus. Now, in fairness to her, the show gives her a reason. She brought that plan because she assumed Jimmy was about to attempt something far worse, and she wanted to steer him toward the smaller crime. That's damage control, and it counts. Watch what happens one episode later, though. Wiedersehen. Kim walks into a building department in Lubbock, Texas on crutches, playing an exhausted single mother. Jimmy is in the room too, doing a bit as her useless brother Bill, leaking the breast milk onto the blueprints. So the clerk offers to swap in Kim's copy, and Kim quietly leaves behind a bigger set of plans than the city ever approved. Nobody was making her do that one. She and Mesa Verde's people had already agreed the change was impossible. No client was going to punish her for letting it go. She did it because it could be done. And the exchange afterward is the whole show in miniature. Kim's the one who says they should only use their powers for good from now on. Jimmy asks her how scamming the city of Lubbock fits into that. She has nothing for him. She just winces. Season 5, Magic Man. Her client Bobby won't take a 5-month plea. Jimmy suggests conning him into it, and Kim is genuinely offended. She throws him out of the conversation. Minutes later, Bobby asks what the argument was about, and she tells the lie herself. He takes the deal. She barely makes it to a stairwell before she comes apart. Now here's the idea that reframed the whole show for me. There's an effect in social psychology called moral licensing. Roughly, once people do something good, they feel like they've banked credit and they go spend it on something bad. The good deed loosens the compass instead of tightening it. I can't tell you the writers had that phrase pinned up on a corkboard. As a way of reading Kim though, it's almost uncomfortable. Every pro bono client she saves makes her more certain she's a good person. Every degree of certainty makes a little darkness more affordable. She's spending her decency. Every unpaid hour is another dollar drawn quietly out of an account nobody's auditing, which means the thing everybody blames Jimmy for might be growing out of her own goodness. That idea sat in my chest for about a week. Her mother is in there too, and I had this scene backwards for years, so let me get it right. The cold open of Axe and Grind is Nebraska, 1984. 16-year-old Kim is sitting in the back office of a department store because she got caught stealing a necklace and a pair of earrings. Her mother arrives and performs, scolds her, threatens punishment, plays the disappointed parent well enough that the manager lets the whole thing go. They step outside and the act evaporates. Her mother laughs and produces the same necklace and the same earrings, which she lifted herself while everyone in the building was busy watching Kim. She hands them over. Relax, you got away with it. Kim wore those earrings for the rest of the series. Every season, right there on screen the entire time. That's a real wound. Plenty of people carry something like it their whole lives and never plan a man's professional execution. So why him? Why Howard? On the arithmetic, it barely holds together. Months of planning, her career on the table, and the prize is a settlement Jimmy was going to collect anyway, arriving sooner. I've come to think Howard was standing in for a lot of people who were never in that room. Look at who he is to her. A wealthy man running an enormous firm who, from where she's sitting, spends none of it on people who have nothing. The man who exiled her to document review as punishment for something Jimmy did. The man who, in her telling, backed Chuck against Jimmy, turned on Chuck when the fallout threatened the firm's balance sheet, and then came to Jimmy afterward to feel better about it. And under all of it, Kim spends 6 seasons being managed and talked over by rich, powerful men. Howard, Chuck, Kevin. She swallows it every time. And the show is so quiet about it that it took me 2 rewatches to notice how often it happens. Now look at who she and Jimmy pick when they scam for sport. Their very first mark together is Ken Wins, a stockbroker so busy performing at the 2 of them that he never notices he's being robbed. Most of the people on that list share something with him. So when a chance appears to take down the man who stands in for every institution that ever looked past her, Howard the individual just evaporates. That's the part that guts me. Howard the individual was vain and smug and petty in a dozen small ways, and cruelty was never in him. She built a villain out of him, and then she punished the thing she'd built. Ray Seahorn said it better than any critic I've read. Talking to Collider in the summer of 2022, she described Kim arriving at a place where she saw herself as the arbiter of who deserves good things, and then going further, deciding she also got to punish whoever needed knocking down a peg. Seahorn tied Kim's silence about Lalo to that same certainty, the belief that if she held every piece of information, she could steer the outcome. Nobody steers it. That's the whole show. Now I have to deal with the ugly cousin of my own argument, because it lives under every Kim video ever posted. It goes like this. A man is only as good as the woman beside him. Jimmy was a screw-up with a heart until she sharpened him into something worse. I want no part of that. It's a very old story about women dragging men to ruin, dressed up as media criticism, and it collapses the moment you look at the record. Jimmy chose. Every single time. He's the one who pulled Kim into conning in the first place, in that hotel bar. He went to his own brother's malpractice insurer and quietly told them about Chuck's condition, and the premiums that followed cost Chuck the firm and eventually his life. He sat on that for years. And once Kim is gone, nobody left to impress, nothing left to win, he keeps going anyway. He's an addict. He loves it. He hurts people. 2 more things I owe you, because I'd rather be right than persuasive. Lalo didn't come to that apartment because of the Howard scheme. He came for his own war with Gus. Howard walked into the wrong room on the wrong night, and Lalo Salamanca killed Howard Hamlin. Nobody else had a finger on that trigger. What I think happened between these 2 is sadder than blame. They were most alive in the 20 minutes right after a con landed. They mistook that feeling for intimacy, and they kept raising the stakes because coming down hurt too much. And then the show stops hinting and just says it, and I wasn't ready for it. Same episode as the memorial. Same 48 hours. By that evening, Kim has surrendered her license, her bags are already packed, and Jimmy is begging her. And she tells him why she never said a word about Lalo, because if she had, Jimmy would have shut the Howard plan down and moved them somewhere safe. Her reason? Through tears? She was having too much fun. I sat with that for a long while. She could have said he made her do it. She could have said she lost herself along the way. She says she was having too much fun. Whatever case I've spent this video building, she'd already made it about herself, years before I got here. Then Florida, which I read wrong for years. I used to think Florida Kim was pathetic, catalog copy for a sprinkler company, a woman who can't say whether Miracle Whip is acceptable, who can't choose between 2 ice cream flavors, who has no say in her own life. She has enormous say. Her boyfriend Glenn asks her opinion constantly. The mayonnaise, the ice cream, whether the 2 of them would be any good on The Amazing Race. She refuses to answer, every time. Anything with a decision buried in it comes back as, "What do you think?" She handed that sentence down to herself. The last time Kim Wexler did what she genuinely wanted, a man died on her living room floor. So she got out of the business of wanting things. 6 years of that. Then Gene calls, and she tells him to turn himself in. And he asks her why she hasn't. So she does. She flies to Albuquerque, files an affidavit with the district attorney, and hands Cheryl Hamlin a copy, knowing full well it gives that woman everything she needs to sue her into the ground, which Cheryl immediately starts doing. Cheryl gives her nothing back. She tells Kim the only Howard anybody remembers now is the one they invented. Then Kim gets on an airport shuttle bus, and 6 years of held breath come out of her at once. I've watched a lot of people people cry on television. I've never watched anything like that. So when somebody tells me Jimmy McGill corrupted Kim Wexler, I think about that highway. She had the exit. She had the meeting. She had the entire life she'd been telling everyone she wanted, and she chose the scam. And I want to be careful here, because Jimmy gets there too. He talks a life sentence down to 7 years, walks into his own sentencing hearing, and throws all of it away for 86. I'm not taking that from him. Nobody does anything braver in this show. But watch the order. Kim goes first. She goes with no prosecutor across the table, no deal on offer, nothing forcing her hand, out of a life where silence would have worked forever. And when Jimmy finally stands up in that courtroom, he says her name. She's the reason. That's why I love her, and it's why I can't call her a victim. Now give me the scene. Be specific. The exact moment where you think Kim crossed a line she couldn't walk back from, with the episode title. I count at least 4 defensible answers, and I want to watch you fight about it.